brackets to some level of inflation. In South Africa, we tend to see it almost every year. This year they didn't because they get more revenue from that bracket creep. And then the other one, which for us, I mean, it's a small change. It was the proposed reduction in the corporate income tax rate from the current 32% to 31% this coming year, and then 30% the next year. So a 1 percentage point increase in each, decrease rather, in each year. And again, it's not a massive change, but for us, it's an important signal.
Of course.
4 or 5 years ago, we were talking about more taxes. Where can we introduce new taxes and more taxes? And now we're going and talking about, and hopefully implementing soon, reduced taxes. So it's a complete 180 on policy, which again sends the right signals, which are very, very important.
Just coming back to the low income threshold, do you have any idea how many people might be impacted by that? How big is that group?
So unfortunately, we're not at the same level of data dissemination as we are, for instance, in South Africa, where you can find out more or less how many taxpayers sit within each bracket. But I mean, I feel quite comfortable saying that, you sort of have two kinds of, you sort of have a pyramid and a diamond shape in terms of the income tax payers versus the income tax received. So if you look at the income tax payers, there'll be a lot of people in those lower thresholds, but the revenue received from them is a lot less than what you get in the middle and the top ends of the brackets. And so you're making a lot of people not pay tax anymore, but you're not really losing much revenue. Okay. So it's a very, very clear game. But we don't have official numbers. It's sort of one of my big wishes that we can start getting an idea of, for instance, how many taxpayers we sit with in different brackets, so we know where the tax burden really lies. Do we have a middle class? Do we not?
We're going to go for a short break in a while, but just to sum it up, it's really important that these are now implemented, because we have been talking about them for a while.
Yes, so that's the big thing, is we've seen these positive policy ideas and discussions and proposals come through, but it's nice to say these things. We need to see them get done. And so, for instance, with the change in the deductibility for your retirement annuities, we spoke about it for many years. It took several years before it was implemented. It's the same with these personal income tax and the corporate income tax changes. It's nice to have these ideas come through, but it doesn't help, sort of hanging these as a carrot in front of us and not seeing that implementation come through. We really need to see that commitment to say, we don't just say these things, we actually do them as well.
Right, that is quite a mouthful. We're going to give you a minute or two to digest that. We'll be right back.
eTicket, your online ticket solution for events and event marketing, bringing you ease of mind and making sure that your event gets out there. For more information, contact events@nmh.com.na.
Welcome back to the Market Watch studio, where we are bringing you live budget coverage, currently in a pre-budget discussion with Cirrus Capital Chief Economist Robert McGregor. Of course, we will bring you the budget live as soon as Finance Minister Iipumbu Shiimi tables it. And also we have the Namibian Sun editor Toivo Njabela at Parliament, and he will start reporting from there shortly. Robert, coming back to our discussion, and another thing people speculate about a lot, it is an election year. Will we, or do you expect a significant increase in expenditure, and where do you think that money will go?
Yes, I mean, It's difficult to be certain until the numbers are there in front of us, but I do think it is a risk. We've seen that from 2015, 16, when fiscal consolidation was introduced, government was quite strong on that fiscal consolidation until around 2019, 2020. Then with COVID, obviously, the impact that had, government tried to stimulate and offset that by spending a lot more. And subsequent to that, we have seen expenditure increase quite a lot over the last few years. The revenue side has managed to keep up because it was off a low base. It's kept up quite nicely the last few years. But the worry is we've been spending a lot. The growth on the expenditure has been quite high the last couple of years. There's obviously more and more pressure to spend more, especially in an election year. I think the good news is, sort of in 2019, we expected a bit of an election year budget given the place that the economy was in, and we didn't see that, which was a very, very positive and welcome surprise to us. However, in 2019, I feel like, again, we had our back against the wall a lot more than we do now. And so I do expect to see a bit more expenditure come through this year. We do have that 5% civil service wage adjustment. I've heard that it was sort of, already within the deficit numbers, it was already within the budget numbers, just not allocated. That's sort of a big question for us because that's around 1.5 to 2 billion in additional expenditure that comes through, and that has quite a large impact. I do think, we'll start to see a bit more expenditure coming through, obviously there on the civil service wage bill, also then on sort of the social grants with some increases coming through there. Hopefully a bit more on the development budget, so that's really on the infrastructure, your schools, hospitals, the important infrastructure going through. I know a lot of the SOEs are doing it on their own balance sheets going forward, which is very encouraging, but I think from government, sort of some of that social infrastructure that we need, that we see a bit more spending there. And then I think, we had a moratorium on things like new vehicles and similar. Those are slowly getting replaced. Understandably, those cars get driven, I think, quite a lot over sort of a 5-year period.
We saw that this weekend.
And so it's understandable that we start to see that come through again. The big question for us is, so long as we aren't growing expenditure faster than revenue, we do need to see those deficits come in a bit over the next couple of years.
Let's quickly go to the civil servants' wage bill, because that always is a controversial issue. Put that into perspective for us quickly.
Yes, the civil service wage bill is by far the single largest proportion of expenditure. It's really where most of the revenue and most of the expenditure goes, at least the largest share of it. I think, we must commend the fact that, we've had now, this will be the second wage adjustment since around 2017. The last wage adjustment was in 2022 at around 3%, which was less than half of inflation at the time. The current wage adjustment of 5% is, slightly below where inflation is at the moment. I think these are really commendable efforts to try and, in nominal terms, reduce the impact of the wage bill, letting everything else grow in proportion, including revenue, to try and reduce that sort of big drain on fiscal expenditure by the wage bill. And especially when we compare it to neighbouring states like South Africa, where they're doing much larger wage adjustments that they simply can't afford, and it's driving real sustainability concerns. And that's where we sat, where the wage bill was taking up ever more of expenditure. We were seeing less going towards the development needs as a result, amongst other issues. And it was really a balancing act that government had to play between, they can't go and reduce the civil service massively because we don't have a growing economy. Those people will struggle to find work in outside of the public service. Then because we aren't creating jobs in private sector, given the constraints we face within the economy. And so the idea was, do we decrease jobs or do we hold off on wage adjustments and maintain those jobs? And I think they've done a relatively good balance there. But again, this doesn't mean that, we're in the clear now and we can just go and let loose again.
Yes. The International Monetary Fund still very concerned about the size of the wage bill. We saw in their staff report, which was released, and it's year after year after year that they urge these reforms, the public wage bill reforms. How do you feel about our progress, though?
Look, I don't think it's anything that we're going to be able to address overnight, unless we do it in a very painful way. And so I think that is sort of a medium to long-term thing we need to address by ensuring that we can grow revenue through growing the economy quicker, and then limiting the growth in the civil service, whether it's from a total employment perspective or whether it's from a wage adjustment perspective. The focus should be to allow private sector to grow. That allows job creation, so where we absorb unemployment not through government directly, but through the private sector. In addition to that, that means that we then have more employment, more people paying taxes, more people spending money in the economy, which means more income for government in terms of company profit taxes, as well as from VAT. That then feeds back into government, where they've got more revenue, and they can start using that revenue on more productive means.
I don't want to labor the point, but the whole issue with jobs, it's very often said that government doesn't do enough to address unemployment in the country. To which extent has the budget been successful in creating jobs?
So, maybe this is my view as a relatively free market economist, is I don't think it's government's responsibility or the budget's responsibility to create jobs. It's government's responsibility to create an environment where the private sector can grow and create jobs. Now there we've obviously been lacking. As I mentioned earlier, we sit with relatively high corporate tax rates. We sit with relatively high input costs compared to some of our neighboring economies. And so from that perspective, we really aren't making ourselves that easy, that direct to invest in. In the extractive sectors, we do see that come through because we simply have that natural resource endowment. And those industries, however, are more capital than labor intensive. What we need to see policy changes that allow private sector to grow, make it easier to invest in this country, make it easier to bring in foreign capital into this country, make it easier to bring in foreign skills, because skilled immigration into the country is on a net basis positive for jobs. It creates jobs. And so, allow that to happen, allow private sector, give them the room to create jobs, get out of private sector's way, reduce the red tape, the bureaucracy, make it easier for that to happen. And again, it's not an overnight fix. It's not going to happen quickly, but that's really the moves we need to make. And we're seeing early positive signs, but again, a lot of it is talk. We need to see more in action.
Right, we're quickly going to take a break. The Namibian Sun's editor, Toyvin Jabela, is at Parliament, and he spoke to the Information Minister, Emma Theophilus, and he's reporting from Parliament.
So we are joined by Minister of Information and Communication Technology, Honorable Emma Theophilus. Thank you, Minister, for making time. Mm-hmm. One of the things that are key now for us in the media industry is the access to information law. It has been passed.
Yes.
But there are enabling tools that are still not in place.
Yes.
What are you looking forward in this budget to make that, to tie those loose ends now going forward?
Yes, you're very right, Toivo. We have passed the access to information law, but it's not yet in operation because the regulations have not been tabled in Parliament.
Yeah.
So we are busy finalizing the regulations, because the regulations are important for the Information Commissioner to start operating.
Yeah.
So we took, enough time to put that in place, and now very soon, I don't want to give you a date, but we won't go past independence without me tabling the regulations in Parliament, because we are really at that advanced stage.
Yeah.
And we have also implored, of course, the Finance Minister who's tabling the budget today to include that in this 2024-2025 budget, so that when that whole process is done, the legislative process is done, and the regulations have been accepted, and I've gazetted them in the Garmin Gazette and signed them off, the Information Commissioner office can begin. Whether it's to start with skeleton staff, so that we start actually with that work of the Information Commissioner being operational as soon as possible.
Yeah. Last question, Minister. You have just been elevated into a full minister in that portfolio. Of course, the advantage is that you were already a deputy in that portfolio, so you have institutional memory. But how important is it that for a new minister to get a good package from Minister Shiimi, so that really in your new portfolio, in your new job, you can run with your ideas?
Oh my goodness, you have no idea. I sometimes wish I could hypnotize Minister Shiimi to give me all the money I ask of him. But as he always says, it's a balance of priorities. And whatever I get, because I now won't get everything I need or want, but whatever I get, I need to, in the next 12 months, to make the best of it. Quick wins, low-hanging fruits, and let the next person take the long haul of whatever projects we put in place. But yes, it's very important for me that I get the financing I need. I mean, look at NBC. Historical challenges, but great opportunities to be a world-class broadcaster. Our print media, I'm talking about equipment and software needed for our ICT centers and as well as our schools.
Absolutely.
ICT is the future. So my hope is that, of course, he gives me all the dollars I need, but in the event he doesn't do so, I need to make the most with what I get and let the dollar go its last mile.
Wonderful. Thank you, Minister.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
All right.
Neo Paints has established a 67-year Namibian legacy, creating personalized paint solutions that blend quality and innovation for the Namibian people. We pride ourselves in being a 100% Namibian-owned company, investing in our country and our people by employing and empowering true Namibians. With every brushstroke, Neo Paints commits to our quality guarantee and always delivering a coat of excellence. At Neo Paints, we always stay true to our country. We are as Namibian as you.
You're still in the Market Watch studio, where we're having a live pre-budget discussion with the Cirrus chief economist, Robert McGregor. Robert, in the video we saw just now with Toivu speaking to the ICT minister, she referred to the NBC. We know historically that money going to SOEs sort of gets everybody a little bit uptight. What are your expectations in this regard?
So I think what's been very encouraging is over the last couple of budgets, we've seen a lot of discipline on transfers to the state-owned enterprises. And I think, that's very welcome. I think, especially with a lot of them, there's better uses for limited government expenditure. So I think I expect to see at least a little bit more discipline coming through from that, not just sort of giving a blank check to SOEs. I think the focus will be really on the core where it's needed in SOEs that really need the assistance. So for instance, not that Transam, for instance, owns the rail, government does, but the government focuses on getting that rail up to scratch because, in my view, quite honestly, rail is one of the lowest hanging fruits in this economy. We've got a lot of other SOEs that are in a good position, NamPort, NamPower, that are doing it on their own balance sheets. But what I suspect we will likely see is what we call sort of some off-balance sheet assistance. So those are referred to as guarantees or contingent liabilities, where government will say, all right, we don't have the money to give to the SOE right now, but what we will do is the SOE can go and borrow that money somewhere else, and if they default, we will then repay that loan. So it's a contingent liability. It's a useful way that government doesn't have to fund it directly, but if there is trouble, they then step in and get involved, and I think it allows government then to focus its spending now on where it really needs to.
Right, we've got Toivu Njabela, editor of the Namibian Sun, back with us, and he spoke to Finance Minister Iipumbu Shiimi.
I know time is limited and the session is about to start, but can you just give us an overview of what we can expect in today's budget presentation?
Well, thank you very much, NBC. The budget, of course, is full of many things. First of all, we are looking at how do we support the economy. That's one. How do we ensure that we provide resources to the needy sectors such as education and health, particularly education. That's why you see my guest today, our school learners, because the theme is about supporting the Namibian child. So we're also making provision for us to ramp up our investment in infrastructure. But there are also provisions for taxpayers. We are going to give some relief to the taxpayers so that we can help to cushion them against inflation. As you know, that inflation has been increasing for quite some time. So we need to give taxpayers some relief. So the details, of course, you'll hear when I present the budget statement.
But how would you describe the current economic outlook of the country in simple terms?
Well, I believe we have come from a very, very difficult past. Things have started to improve. So the budget was crafted in an environment which was much better than the previous few years. So I'm quite optimistic and positive, but it means we still, all of us, we still have to work harder for us to be able to create the necessary opportunities, especially for job creation.
The public has been waiting for this day. What main message do you want them to take from today's budget presentation?
The main message is that yes, the economy is improving, but it means we all have to bring our part to ensure that the Namibian economy is going to grow even faster so that we can reduce unemployment and poverty.
That was the Minister of Finance.
Right, yes, of course, that was not the Namibian Sun editor, Toivu Njibela. What he did do is to capitalize, let's call that capitalize, on a video or an interview that the NBC was making, and he sent us that clip. They spoke to Finance Minister Iipumbu Shiimi. What kind of feeling do you get from the little bit that he had to say?
So, I mean, there was obviously a very clear focus there on education and the youth, as he mentioned. My hope is that we see particularly growth in the development budget towards key infrastructure, a focus on really, what should be government's focus areas or priorities, so the likes of healthcare, education. And so I'm hoping we see a bit more going towards, not just the operational expenditure, because we know in the ministries like healthcare and education, they are by far the largest receivers of revenues or of expenditure from the government. But that's largely towards personnel expenditure, and we see very little at the end of the day left over for that development expenditure, which I think is critical. So hopefully seeing a bit more there, and then as he mentioned, hopefully some inflationary relief. So hopefully we do see some clear timetables on the implementation of the changes to tax policy, especially.
Of course, we will bring you those details with the live stream as soon as the Finance Minister tables his budget. In the meantime, overall, what is our debt situation?
So we have at least sort of backed off from the cliff edge. Debt to GDP remains relatively high, but it's benefited the last 2 or 3 years from really high nominal GDP growth. So suddenly, we aren't seeing debt to GDP increase as it had in previous years. Rather, we're seeing it actually slowly come down. That's also because we're looking at trying to grow debt a little bit more slowly. And that's really where those deficits come in, the difference between what revenue the government gets in and what it spends. And that's really the big sign for us, is we want to see those deficits come down, government spending a little bit more within its means with each passing year, so that we issue less and less debt, because debt might seem like a short-term fix, but effectively it is just a future tax on taxpayers, because at some day, you might not have to necessarily repay that debt, but there are interest payments associated with that debt as well. The outlook for the cost of debt going forward is a bit more positive, but at the moment, we spend upwards of 10% of our revenue just servicing debt. And again, that's money that could be better spent towards other uses. And so really we want to see a commitment to ensuring that revenue grows, limiting the growth of expenditure relative to that revenue, so that we have smaller deficits. Government needs to borrow less money, and that with time, they don't have to spend money on interest payments, but rather on spending it on, especially towards development infrastructure and the development budget. That's an area that's been lacking for many years now.
In terms of our debt composition, is that healthy?
For the most part, yes, actually. We sit in a very good position where the overwhelming majority of our debt is issued in local currency. So we've got some very small JSE listed bonds. We've got obviously the Eurobond, which is a large single payment, but not massive compared to total debt. We have a little bit of bilateral debt here and there. We've got the IMF rapid financing instrument, which we'll need to start repaying from around June this year. But by far the majority of our debt sits in local currency and largely sits with local investors, which means that we don't have to worry about the risks that some neighboring or other regional countries have faced, where it's debt denominated in foreign currency, where you can then risk defaulting on, and that has major consequences. So our debt composition is very positive, and I think there's been a concerted effort over the past sort of 7-8 years to make sure that we reduce the proportion foreign debt, because I think there's a very conservative view that we need to be cautious in our exposure to foreign debt.
The Minister, no doubt this afternoon, will once again make reference to the Sovereign Wealth Fund. For people out there who don't exactly know what that is, could you explain that in layman's terms?
So again, it sort of largely depends on what sort of the nature in which it takes on. But the idea there is that government takes some of its possible revenue streams, especially around things like natural resources, and instead of just funneling them into everyday expenditure and things like the wage bill and similar, that we build up this fund that sees us through over the long term and can have very specific uses. So where there are budget deficits, for instance, or shortfalls, that there's a sovereign wealth fund that can help offset that to some extent, that there's a long-term infrastructure fund, so that this fund then helps government develop infrastructure in country. It can be used towards social needs. Again, it depends really on what sort of structure we're taking on, but the early signs we've seen around the sovereign wealth fund are very, very promising, and I think it's a vital step given the promise we see along the natural resource route. We are a bit worried about the diamonds at the moment with the weak prices we see, but uranium is doing very well, gold is doing very well. And there's obviously the potential around oil and gas revenues should that take off. And I mean, those will be, sizable. Again, we don't have anything official just to really work with, but if we do go ahead into production at any size or scale, given how small our economy is, those are massive potential revenues sitting there for the state. And it's important that we don't just channel those directly into the budget to spend quickly, but rather we invest those over the long term through something like a sovereign wealth fund.
Right. We are returning to Namibian Sun editor Toivo Njabela at Parliament, and we're going to hear from the Commissioner of the Namibia Revenue Agency, NAMRA, and that is Sam Shivute.
We are now speaking to Sam Shivute. He is the Commissioner for the Namibia Revenue Agency. Thank you, Sam. It's a very important day on the calendar. And we know that a day like this, NAMRA is involved in so many different ways. It has been a very successful year for you. You have hit your targets, you have your revenue targets, your tax collection targets. Yeah. How important is it on a day like this that, what does that mean in the context of the state revenue collection in general?
Yeah, thank you very much, Toivo, for the opportunity to speak to you and to also to speak to the Namibian people. I think for us it's very critical because our mandate is very clear: to improve revenue collection, to improve service delivery, and also, of course, when you have a target and you are able to hit that target, it can't get better than that. You would understand that last year our total revenue collection was 57 billion. But this year, our revised target, initially our target was at 67 billion, and it was then revised to 71 billion. But I'm very happy to share with you that already by the 26th of February 2024, we have already exceeded the revised target of 71 billion with about 5%. And that is very, very exciting because we still have 1 month to go. We still have 1 month to go and 3 days. And we have already exceeded the target of 71 billion. And I can only thank the support that I've been getting from my colleagues. I can only thank the teams, the men and women in a navy and in a touch of orange who have not been sleeping, making sure that sufficient revenue is collected so that the Minister of Finance and Public Enterprise will then be able to deliver that budget and also to ensure that the state is properly capacitated to address the socio-economic challenges faced our country. I'm very, very happy today.
Wonderful. Yeah. Last question before I let you go, Mr. Shivute. You, NAMRA, and you personally go through a lot. People scrutinizing you sometimes so harshly. And when you're executing your mandate, they said they should have been a bit lenient and stuff like that, and you seem to have always have that fortitude that you carry your mandate to the letter. On days like this, do you feel vindicated that you have done your job, your patriotic duty to contribute to what the minister is going to put to table today in this house.
Yeah, certainly. But despite the harsh criticism or whatever, we have a mandate to carry out. And the job that we do is a very thankless job. But what motivates and inspires, just the fact that an elderly lady or someone who is dependent on the social grant, someone who could either become destitute if it was not because of the work that we do, the fact that they are able to live a dignified life, the fact that we are able to positively impact their life, that is what really inspires and motivate us to keep going, to keep doing what we're supposed to do. And again, remember, we are still in the reform, rebuilding stage, and the best is yet to come. The best is yet to come. I was very happy when I was speaking with the AD of Ministry of Finance that with this budget delivery, the budget deficit will also be reduced. We're looking forward to a day whereby we should be able to fund the budget 100% with our domestic resources. So we have to strengthen domestic resource mobilization. I want to encourage my teams all over the world, all over Namibia, to continue working very hard, working for the best interest of Namibia, not serving individual, knowing very well that we are serving a divine purpose. And we are going to do this work with passion so that we make sure that the state is capacitated, we have peace and stability, our hospitals, they are resourced with medication, our police officer and civil servant, they are paid. All this does not come at a silver platter. Someone have to strengthen this domestic resource mobilization, and that is our simple mandate, and we are doing it with passion. Absolutely. And we do not expect anyone to say thank you to us, because it's a divine purpose that we are serving.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So thank you very much. Keep up the good work.
Thank you, Theo.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And that was Toivo Njabela. He's the editor of the Namibian Sun, talking to Namara Commissioner Sam Shivute at Parliament. Robert, Mr. Shivute certainly seems confident and happy.
I think yes. I mean, I think that's something that's been very encouraging for us is this spinning out of sort of the inland revenue into the Namibia Revenue Agency, operationalizing that. The efficiency gains, I think, have been notable. And I mean, talking there about being 5% above their revised ceiling is. I think, he mentioned that they do a thankless job. I can say I'm very thankful, definitely, that they're doing such a good job. That's really something that's been important for us is, years ago we were talking about more taxes, new taxes. But there's a clear sign here that even without more taxes or new taxes, that there was tax revenue still to be collected. We just needed to improve the manner in which we do it. And I think that sort of goes to show that, we don't need to, increase taxes. We need to just be better at the administration side of it. And I mean, again, provides room for the view that we could actually look at reducing some of the taxes as we've spoken about, but now just implementing it.
Sticking to taxes, let's quickly talk a little bit about customs and excise in terms of SACU, Southern African
Customs Union.
Customs Union. I wanted to go to SADC there for a moment, excuse me. Right, SACU, what do you expect regarding SACU?
So SACU is always very difficult. It can be very volatile. What we have seen is our Ministry of Finance remains incredibly conservative on their SACU forecasts, and honestly, I think that is it's very good. It's a prudent move because of that volatility. You rather under forecast with the potential for increases than over forecast, and then you sit with more money that you need to try and find from somewhere else. Or money that you do need to try and find from somewhere else, largely borrowing domestically in a larger deficit. My expectation is that what we've seen from the South African budget is that for the upcoming fiscal year 2024-2025, they've made revisions both in the midterm budget in South Africa last year and now in this budget for a little bit more in the kitty there. We haven't increased our forecasts for that. We didn't make changes in the midterm budget. And so I think we can expect a little bit more from SACU for the upcoming year, which is great as long as we don't spend more than that. And then also looking forward, again, South Africa has sort of revised their forecast down a bit, but we're a lot more negative on those forecasts than South Africa is. And I think, again, that's the right approach. Rather, sit here in the same position next year with a little bit more money than you expected, than the risk of having less than you were planning on.
Exactly. Let's go back to Toivo Njabela, editor of the Namibian Sun. He's at Parliament. He spoke to Maximilian Kachimune, it's a Member of Parliament from the PDM.
Now we have PDM Member of Parliament Maximilian Kachimune. Thank you, Honourable, for your time. It's budget day. What is your expectation today?
Well, Mr. Twivo, the Minister of Finance has surrounded his budget around youth-centered themes for a number of years now. And it has never really resulted into anything tangible. We've been asking the Soho Party what are they going to do about the graduate unemployment crisis in particular and the youth unemployment crisis in general. And they've given us no tangible results in terms of what are the key interventions that they are going to do, that they are going to implement in order to ensure that young people are employed. And we see that there's now no end, there's no hope for unemployed graduates across the country. And I expect in the Minister's Finance statement to give some sort of unemployment grant to graduates and youth in general who are unemployed, because there's no end in sight to the unemployment crisis. If the government cannot create jobs, they must create social safety cushions for young people in order for them to submit that CV, in order for them to take that tax, in order for them to survive on a daily basis. And I think it's about time that we introduce some sort of unemployment grant for young people. Secondly, we expect the Minister of Finance to fulfill the promises of the President in terms of the old age pension. In African tradition, it's very rude to not fulfill the promises of the departed. So even if it's not the 3,000, we expect the President, the Finance Minister, to increase the pension for old age people. And the drought situation is very concerning across the country. We expect the minister to take some funds off the presidency. The presidency got a very high allocation last year. We don't know for what. We're expecting to take some funds there and give it to the drought situation in the country. We expect the education budget to also be increased to improve the school infrastructure across the country and so forth. So that is what I expect from the budget today.
Yeah. Last question quickly. These interventions that you are suggesting, are they sustainable? Are they possible? Or is this election year and Mr. Kachimune is trying to...
No, they are definitely sustainable, Mr. Jebela. One thing that I can tell you is that there's a lot of wastage in government. If you take into account, for example, S&Ts, for example, if you take into account what we spend on workshops that we can have, log onto a computer on Zoom and not fly to other countries, for example, then do desktop studies. There's a lot of wastage in those particular areas. And if we can really tap into those particular areas and see where we can stop the wastage, we can fund all these things. So I definitely do think it's sustainable.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jebela.
Robert, yes, he touched there on a question that I wanted to pose to you in any case. Your economic outlook, etc., shows very clearly that agriculture is in trouble. Do you expect, or firstly, how bad is it? And do you expect any announcements around drought relief in today's budget?
So, I mean, the situation is quite mixed. The thing is that, we've come in and out of good years and bad years. Even when we had good rainfall in some parts of the country, we sit with bad rainfall or terrible rainfall in others. And so, it really has seemed over the past almost decade, at least, that we've had drought, at least in some part of the country, without much relief. So, I'm worried about especially the crop farming subsector. The livestock, they've had a little bit of good rains. They'll sort of reduce livestock now, and then hopefully, the indications are that going into the second half of this year, we should be back into La Nina, hopefully above average rainfall, or at least average rainfall. But agriculture, the challenges we do sit in an arid or semi-arid country. It's always going to be a challenge for us. I think the focus should be that we reduce reliance from agriculture, or on agriculture, particularly as a subsistence form. So that subsistence agriculture numbers high, bring people into the more formalized economy that's more resilient to drought. But I think, farming is a thankless job, and the weather doesn't make it any easier. I think we will likely still see some drought relief coming through. Again, it depends, really on which areas are suffering from those droughts. I think something that really helps, especially the farmers who struggle with this, is timely VAT repayments and similar, to ensure that there's sufficient cash flow for them. But again, if we're seeing better revenue collections than expected, and we're not doing wastage elsewhere, that does provide room for more relief as and where it's needed. And hopefully we do see that come through in the right manner to the right places as well.
Robert, thank you very much for joining us. You've indicated that you've got to rush back to Cirrus Capital because you've got a long day and night ahead of you. We'll speak to you a bit later. Thank you very, very much for your insights, and we'll be right back. You're still in the Market Watch studio, where we're going to bring you the tabling of the 2024-25 budget by Finance Minister Iipumbu Shiimi live. We are now going to cross over to Parliament, where they are still busy with matters regarding the order of the day, Mr. Shiimi's budget.
Thought is that the food or maize meal is expired and not fit for human consumption. However, hunger drove them to eat it anyway because they are starving as a result of germs or other harmful things that are found in those maize meals. My questions, yes, therefore will be, Honorable, the other one. Honorable Minister, what has happened to the laboratory test carried out since last year to determine the cause of death of those 15 family members who died of food poisoning last year? When will this report be made public for us to know what has happened and why these 16 family members died? The deafening silence from your ministry to release that report is sickening. It is an act of concealment, but the immediate family of the deceased, and by extension Namibia at large, needs to know which of the two schools of thoughts is real. It is high time that this report be made public for the sake of the departed souls to eventually rest in peace. In terms of your ministry mandate as a minister, have you undertaken familiarization visit to the two Kavango regions to ascertain what the underlying reasons are of why some residents there eat expired food? Subsequently to the death of the 16 family members last year, what mitigating measures have your ministry put in place to prevent another catastrophic event like that one to happen in the near future? Are you aware of the recent death of the two children in the Kavango East region who equally died of food poisoning? And will you wait until others equally die of the same before intervening? Are you using the money allocated, and we will hear now from the Honorable Minister how much he has allocated to your ministry? Are you using it effectively in as far as addressing the root causes of poverty in the two regions? Food distributed to those most vulnerable people in the regions? What was that question again? Wait you. Wait. Aye, my Lord. Is food distributed to those most vulnerable people in the two regions? If yes, where, and can you provide statistics of how this food is distributed? Will you agree with me that the level of poverty in the two Kavango regions is out of proportions compared to other parts of the country and need drastic intervention from your ministry? Lastly, how do you sleep at night, Honorable Minister, knowing that there are Namibians dying every year because of hunger, while there is no excuse whatsoever in this rich-prone Namibia for such to happen. If only this government priorities was right, coupled with humility and duty of care towards its citizens. You know, even if you are making how many much noise, I will still have my say. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, very good.
Honorable Murora, please. Let's listen to each other. I want to get to the budget.
Honorable Speaker, I do have a very urgent oral question to the Minister of Finance and Public Enterprises.
Can I get the gist of it?
Honorable Speaker, last Friday, I heard some news that I think it's better said in Afrikaans. They say, and it affects Namibia, they say in Afrikaans, there's a man van 12 ambachten en 13 ongelukken. Basically means that your economic decline is much more than your progress for better livelihood. And that is basically on the fact of the grey listing of Namibia. We, this August House, in this case, passed 13, if I'm not mistaken, amendment bills to avoid the grey listing of Namibia last year. Just to learn last Friday that Namibia has actually been grey listed. My big question is, what is it that we, the National Assembly or Parliament, has done wrong or avoided to do that Namibia is today grey listed? And the minister is stating, or said to be stating in the newspapers, that we still have to work on 13 actions, requirement actions from the Financial Action Task Force so that we can meet those requirements. But we are given a year. Now the big question is, Honorable Speaker, we are as Namibia spending, and we have spent a lot of money, I think more than 20 million in Dubai for an investors conference. And this year alone, Namibia is supposed to have an Africa Hydrogen Summit where investors has to come and really find ways and means of how they can invest and develop this hydrogen in Namibia. We have just struck oil, which has to be developed, which is very hopeful for us. And all those things has now fallen down the drain. We has to do as a nation so that Namibia has to come back on track. Thank you.
Thank you. I think the issue that I want to put the minister is the grey listing.
Yeah.
Other thing, let's postpone them, not for now.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. First of all, I also speak Afrikaans, Honorable Murora. So I think
Thank you very much. I'm going to move on. The Honorable Shakupakela.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker, Honorable members. The first week when we started, I was given a homework by the Deputy Minister of Education, Art and Culture to go and put my question on the paper, what I did today. I gave notice that on Thursday, 7th of March 2024, I shall ask the Minister of Education, Arts and Culture, Honorable Anna Ngipondokwa, the following questions. As we are at the beginning of the year, I want us to look at the challenges that are being experienced by the schools and also by the parents and guardians of the schools going children. Earlier, I raised a concern of lack of textbooks in schools. The schools are expected to implement the new curriculum in the absence of important materials like textbooks. Could this be a contributing factor to higher rate failure in the country? The question to the Minister of Education, Arts and Culture is, what are the plans in place to address this problem that has been persisting over years since the new curriculum was introduced? I so move.
Thank you very much. Short and sweet. Prime Minister.
Speaker, mine is a notice of a motion.
Oh, yes. You are on time.
Thank you. I give notice, Honorable Speaker, Honorable Members, that tomorrow, the 29th of February, 2024, I shall move that this Assembly approves the appointment by His Excellency the President, the following members of the Boundaries Delimitation and Demarcation Commission in terms of Article 104 sub 1 of the Namibian Constitution, read together with Section 5 of the Regional Councils Act 1992, Act number 22 of 1992 as amended. 1. Justice Retired Petrus Unengu, Chairperson. 2. Ms. Priska Anyolo, Expert in Law and Traditional Affairs Governance. 3. Mr. Gerhard Burirat, Historian and Curator. 4. Mr. Phineas Topnar, Educationist and Pastor. And 5. Professor Fanuel Kapama, Political Scientist and Lecturer. I so move.
Thank you. I'm just smiling when I had Honorable Sepep asking the question. Honorable Ithete. Thank you very much. We move on. Messages from the head of state, ministerial statements, and I now move to the topic that brought us together this afternoon. The first notice of a motion, the one of the Honorable Minister of Finance and Public Enterprises. Does the Honorable Minister move that the bill now introduced?
I so move, Honorable Speaker.
Thank you. Who seconds the motion? Is there any objection?
You won't have money for this.
It is agreed to. Will the Honorable Minister please table the bill?
Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
The Secretary will now read the bill the first time. Does the Honorable Minister of Finance and Public Enterprises move that the bill be now read a second time?
I so move, Honorable Speaker.
Any objection? Who seconds? That's agreed to.
You need the money, Savior.
Honorable Minister, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, honorable members of Parliament, fellow Namibians, I have the distinct honor this afternoon to table before the National Assembly the budget proposal for 2024-2025, and the medium-term expenditure framework for 2024-2025 up to 2026-2027, under the theme, Continuing the Legacy of His Excellency, Dr. Hage Geingob, by Caring for the Namibian Child. I repeat, continuing the legacy of His Excellency, Dr. Hage G. Geingob, by caring for the Namibian child. Before I delve into the details of the budget, Honorable Speaker, I would like to share with you my back-to-school journey. In the early morning of the 23rd of January, 2024, I started with my school tour in the Commerce region. On that day, I left home around about 7 o'clock a.m. to visit the Havana High School, located in the Havana location of Kadutura. Because I was traveling in the opposite direction of the morning traffic flow, it was a blissful drive for me. Traffic was not a problem at all. For those who were driving towards the town center and other places of the eastern side of the city, however, it was a nightmare as I noticed a long queue of cars. In that moment, I couldn't help but to envision how the traffic situation in Windhoek would look like in the next 10 years. In that spur of the moment, I made a mental note that I need to have a discussion over a cup of coffee with Her Worship, the Mayor of Windhoek, in this regard. Soon I arrived at Havana High School, only to see a multitude of young children walking to school. For a brief moment, I thought I was at the wrong place because I expected a secondary school to have all the learners, only to realize later that there are, in fact, two newly constructed schools next to each other, the Havana High School and the Monte Cristo Primary School. At the Havana High School, I was joined by a few of my colleagues from our ministry and a team from the Namibia Revenue Agency, NAMRA. Mr. Mweti, the school principal, a board member, and some staff members gave us a brief history of the school. I could hardly comprehend that a few years ago, the whole place was full of tents. That's where learning was taking place. Soon after, we commenced with a school tour after I gave a brief address to learners who were gathered in a disciplined fashion at the school amphitheater. At Havana, we could see government resources put to good use. Blocks of classrooms, a computer laboratory, a library, sport facilities, etc. The school was still waiting for some additional equipment and books to be delivered, but overall, the school has made an impressive progress. I was subsequently saddened to know that part of the school roof was damaged by the strong wind last Friday. We still have to understand what happened there. Nonetheless, we decided we cannot end in Havana. Again, in the early morning of the 8th of February, we were at the Augustinium Secondary School. This is another school that benefited from the Education and Training Quality Improvement Project, a collaboration between the government of Namibia and the Africa Development Bank. Augustinium is a special place. That name is interwoven with the history of our departed president. His Excellency Dr. Geingob was a student at the Augustinium College, and so is our speaker. Under the stewardship of Mr. Matengu, the school principal, we toured the newly renovated school hostel, dining room, and the school hall. We saw firsthand what tax money could do if appropriately deployed to care for the Namibian child. Before rushing off to the mixed primary school, we conveyed our sincere condolences to the staff and learners of the Augustinium Secondary School, who all gathered in the newly renovated school hall for the loss of their alumni. Mixed Primary School is a new school at the mixed settlement around the Brakwater area. So far, only few buildings are completed, but construction work was in full swing at the time of our visit. For now, only the little ones in the pre-primary and grade 1 learners are accommodated at that school. Prior to our arrival at the school, Ms. Lopez, the school principal, had already marshaled the little ones in line, singing us a welcoming song. When I greeted them, they replied emphatically, "Good morning, teacher." Who can blame them for thinking that I'm also a teacher? For your full appreciation of the infrastructure development at Havana High School, Augustinium Secondary School, and the Mixed Primary School, let's watch a short video that documented our visits while I'm drinking a bit of water. It's coming. Just listen. Let's watch.
The Ministry of Finance and Public Enterprise's main goal is to develop economic and fiscal policies that effectively manage public finances, fostering
seeking connection to each other, to the world, to the spaces we exist in.
Is het van Seil wat hem kom uitrol hier van die posisie.
Poor sportsmanship right now from the lads.
You might be physically ready, your body is ready, but mentally.
Here's another chance and it is a goal from Vindo Kahana.
Wys hy sê wie hy is dan neergetrek en daai bal het my grond gevat. Wie hy het grond gevat en is
but just enough next.
So, we will be doing this for the mountain climber. More advanced, slightly advanced.
So, is jou trolley reg? Want
I love that. I love that. So then
kickstart our countdown at number 5 with this one.
Op Netwerk TV se Klets Kompas gesels ons nuus van 'n Maandag tot Donderdag. Ons kyk ook na die weer en meer. Stories wat jou raak en stories wat saak maak.
They've made a mistake in denying me bail, and they've made several other mistakes in many other cases.
The channels that teach us something new or reflect our expression. So it goes beyond switching to the right station. It's about choosing the experience that can adorn the present, dressing it with our tastes as we expand our preferences, because what we are actually connecting to is boundless, limitless human energy. And this is the spirit of NTV.
E-ticket, your online.
Mr. you from Augustinium Secondary School, and some of their best performing learners are my special guests today who accompany me to Parliament. I would like all of them to stand up, so we extend to them a warm welcome to the National Assembly, if you allow them.
Welcome to Parliament, welcome to the National Assembly. Thank you for being here. You are most welcome. It's your Parliament.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. I will reflect further on my back-to-school journey later in my remarks. Honorable Speaker, fiscal and financial context of the budget. The global economy continues to show resilience in the face of significant adverse risks that prevailed since the onset of the global pandemic. In the World Economic Outlook update released in January 2024, the International Monetary Fund estimates global growth to remain steady at 3.1% in 2023 and 2024, before increasing marginally to 3.2% in 2025. Global growth remains below the historical average, weighed down by elevated interest rates to curb inflationary pressures, low productivity, as well as limited fiscal support due to high debt levels. On the commodity price front, international fuel and non-fuel commodity prices are projected to trend downwards during 2024, in line with subdued global demand. Nonetheless, significant downside risks remain, further heightened by the continued geopolitics in the Red Sea region, with risk of generating fresh adverse supply shocks to the global economic recovery. For the domestic economy, muted commodity prices present a significant risk for domestic production and export earnings, particularly for the diamond subsector. Nevertheless, on the upside, falling international commodity prices translate into reduced domestic price pressures going forward. Honorable Speakers, honorable members, on the regional front, economic activities in the sub-region are estimated to remain steady, with growth projected to gradually increase from 3.3% in 2023 to 3.8% in 2024 and 4.1% in 2025. The growth prospects for the region largely reflect easing supply constraints, resilient domestic demand, and subsiding impact of negative weather shocks. Domestic economic developments and outlook. Honorable Speaker, the domestic economic outlook has improved significantly as reflected in the last quarterly GDP statistics released by the Namibia Statistics Agency. In this regard, we estimate GDP growth at 5.6% in 2023 before moderating to 4% in 2024 and 3.9% in 2025. The strong growth is anchored by upbeat activities in the natural resource sector, including residual impact of ongoing petroleum exploration on domestic economic activities and a surge in uranium production following price increases. In addition, sentiments have also broadly improved across many other sectors of the economy, such as tourism, transport and storage, financial services, and electricity generation. Nonetheless, the strong economic activities largely reflect recovery in the traditional engines of growth, particularly the mining sector, which is highly capital intensive. As such, the projected economic recovery is not expected to address the pervasive and entrenched national challenges such as high unemployment, poverty, and income inequalities. Consequently, the agency to diversify the economy remains a key cornerstone of our fiscal and economic policy framework moving forward. This will require government to create a conducive environment by addressing the identified binding constraints to growth and addressing existing policy coordination barriers that could facilitate a faster emergence of new engines of growth, especially in sectors with potential to create higher quality jobs. In this vein, we will continue to implement the economic diversification strategy and integrate it into the upcoming 6th National Development Plan, NDP 6. Furthermore, we will pursue potential new industries through the green industrialization agenda that not only promises to diversify Namibia's export, but can also increase the complexity of our economy. On the positive note, however, the surge in growth and the resultant improvement in public revenue has created a much-needed avenue for a stronger structural reform momentum, which could bolster productivity with positive spillover effects on the broader economy. Furthermore, government can utilize the boost in public revenues to address the acute infrastructure backlog, especially in the areas of housing, railway, water, education, and health. Honourable Speaker, aligned with global developments, domestic prices moderated to an average of 5.9% in 2023, in contrast to 6.1% recorded in the previous year. Similarly, the latest data prints for January 2024 showed a continued downward trend in prices, with an annual inflation rate of 5.4%. Going forward, inflationary pressures are expected to subside over time, although the speed of moderation remains largely dependent on the performance of the exchange rate and global commodity price development, among others. The abating inflationary pressures is a welcome development for corporate and household balance sheets alike. Nonetheless, the impact of the prevailing monetary policy tightening cycle still weighs heavily on domestic consumption. As a result, we are keenly aware of the need to provide some measure of fiscal stimulus to improve household disposable income and boost consumer spending power. Consequently, the fiscal policy stance for the next medium-term expenditure framework should balance rebuilding fiscal buffers with providing the necessary fiscal stimulus to boost domestic demand. Fiscal development, Honourable Speaker. When I tabled the 2023-2024 budget, 2024 mid-year budget review in this House on the 25th of October 2023, I provided full account of the actual fiscal outcomes in respect of the previous financial year, as well as the revised estimates for 2023-2024. On the same day, I also tabled the Appropriation Amendment Bill, which provided an additional operational budget of 2.5 billion and some 2.3 billion for interest payments. This exercise subsequently shifted the global expenditure ceiling for 2023-2024 upwards to 89 billion Namibia dollar. The preliminary indicators at the end of January 2024 show strong improving fiscal fundamentals driven by strong revenue growth due to improved tax administration as well as a domestic economic recovery. In this context, revenue collection stood at 72 billion, translating into a collection rate of 90.6% over the first 10 months of the financial year. This is significantly higher than the corresponding historical average. We have noted particularly strong collections in the revenue categories of corporate income tax, with a collection rate of 109.6%. Value-added tax, which recorded 89.7% collection, as well as withholding tax on services and tax on royalty, which both stood at 130% of estimated revenue over the period. In addition, a total of 2.5 billion has been collected on various tax categories through the tax amnesty program between April 2023 and January 2024. On the downside, however, dividends underperformed primarily due to significant decline in the global diamond prices over the period, which has adversely affected the financial performance of the NamDeb Group over the medium term. Given the strong year-to-date collections, and with 2 months remaining in the financial year, we have subsequently revised the revenue estimates for 2023-2024 upwards by 2.5 billion to a total of 81.1 billion Namibia dollar. Honourable Speaker, honourable members, regarding non-interest expenditure, the preliminary outturn at the end of January 2024 stood at 54.1 billion. This is equivalent to 70.7% of the revised expenditure numbers presented in the 2023-2024 mid-year budget review. In this context, On the operational budget, an execution rate of 73.6% was recorded over the period, while the implementation rate on the development budget, including expenditure commitments, stood at 64.5%. The spending rate is below historical levels for this time of the year. As a result, we do not anticipate significant expenditure overruns by the end of the financial year. On the statutory expenditure, 92% of the budget was spent by the end of January 2024. Cognizant of the potential overspending, interest payments are revised upwards marginally by 78.4 million. On the financing front, 10.4 billion, equivalent to 80.4% of the total funding requirement, was secured over the same period. Consequently, the total debt stock stood at 151.3 billion, equivalent to 61.3% of GDP. From a sustainability perspective, public debt growth has stabilized, and the debt metrics have started declining, primarily driven by strong growth in nominal GDP, which outpaced the increase in the nominal debt stock. Despite this, it remains crucial for the fiscal framework to maintain a primary budget surplus over the upcoming medium-term expenditure framework to contain the pace of debt accumulation. Overall, the budget deficit for 2023-24 is expected to improve significantly to 3.2% of GDP when compared to our initial estimates of 4.2% at midterm and in the main budget last year. Budget policy pillars. The budget I present before you today is crafted taking particular care to make the necessary provisions to programs aimed at supporting domestic demand and stimulating economic activities. At the same time, we remain keenly aware that government cannot achieve sustainable job creation without the support of private businesses, including small and medium enterprises. As such, the fiscal framework considered the requisite interventions to create a conducive operating environment to enable the private sector to expand domestic investments. As a result of the strong growth in GDP supported by improvements in tax administration measures by NAMRA, we have noted significant improvements in several revenue streams and subsequently some key fiscal indicators. Notably, we have observed much welcome stabilization in the key public debt metrics. However, a significant portion of our government debt portfolio is due for repayment over the medium-term expenditure framework. The largest among these maturities is the $750 million equivalent to 14.3 billion Namibia dollar Eurobond due on the 29th of October 2025. This is the largest single-day debt maturity in the history of our country. In this regard, we are committed to redirect part of the increase in revenues towards the sinking fund to manage the rollover risk and contain increases in future debt service obligations. This will ensure that we minimize a potentially significant future drain on resources that are desperately needed for infrastructure development, poverty reduction, and combating climate change, among others. Accordingly, the government will transmit at least 3.5 billion during the 2024-2025 and 2 billion in the 2025-2026 of SACU receipts to the sinking fund to place us in a position to retire 2/3 of the Eurobond, which is 500 million, at maturity. Consequently, the remaining 1/3 of the bond, which is equivalent to $250 million, will be refinanced utilizing the most cost-effective instrument in the next financial year, cognizant of the prevailing high interest environment and the need to manage debt servicing costs. In this regard, consideration will also be given to the domestic markets as well as financing from development finance institutions. Furthermore, the past years of difficult economic conditions have culminated in slowed pace of public investments as evidenced in a persistently small and falling development budget. As a result, there has been a significant underinvestment in critical infrastructure. Subsequently, a key priority over the next medium-term expenditure framework is to make necessary provisions to accelerate infrastructure development and unlock lasting social and economic value for our country. In summary, Honourable Speaker, the 2024-2025 budget is built on three reinforcing policy pillars. Firstly, the budget prioritizes stimulating domestic demand through a menu of policy actions to boost household incomes and create a conducive environment for businesses to thrive and expand investments. Secondly, it accelerates investments in productive public infrastructure through an increase in the development budget to upgrade infrastructure that has become a hindrance to economic activities, as well as to expand social infrastructure to meet the needs of a growing and rapidly urbanizing populace and ensure the delivery of frontline public services. Thirdly, the fiscal framework continues the path to cultivate fiscal prudence through maintaining a primary surplus, thereby moderating the pace of debt accumulation. Further consideration has been made in the budget to ensure that Namibia is able to honor her debt obligations over the medium-term expenditure framework with relative ease and in the cost-effective manner. While pursuing the above policy objectives, Honourable Speaker, we remain cognizant of our social and everyday lived realities, including poverty levels, high unemployment, and frequent incidents of drought. Accordingly, specific provisions have been made in this budget to safeguard livelihoods and guard against excess reversals on gains made in social sectors. In this context, Honourable Speaker, in terms of Article 126, Sub-Article 1 of the Namibian Constitution, it gives me pleasure to table for favourable consideration and approval of the House the following. A, the 2024-2025 Appropriation Bill. B, 2024-2025 up to 2026-27 Medium-Term Expenditure Framework. C, Estimate of Revenue, Income and Expenditure for the Medium-Term Expenditure Framework. D, Development Programs over the MTF. And E, the Fiscal Strategy for the MTF period. Now let's come to the 2024-2025 budget, medium-term outlook and fiscal policy stance. Honourable Speaker, honourable members, as always, the key organizing principle of the national budget remains to maintain a careful balancing act in pursuing a people-centered but sustainable budgetary framework. The overall goal is to make a positive impact in the day-to-day lives of our citizenry and avoid reversals on the social and economic gains we have attained since independence. From a revenue perspective, Honourable Speaker, we have noted significant improvements. In this regard, we estimate total revenue of 90.4 billion for the next financial year, which is 2024-2025, an increase of 11.5% from the revised estimates of the previous year. The substantial boost to revenue stems from a positive adjustment in SACCO receipts, which is estimated at 28 billion, significantly better than our initial projections. Similarly, several domestic revenue streams have also been revised upwards. In this context, income tax on individuals is estimated to increase by 1.3 billion over the revised estimates of 2023-2024. VAT is estimated to increase by 1.7 billion, while non-mining company taxes are estimated to increase by 759.4 million over the same period. In addition to the above, the revenue estimates for 2024-2025 include expected dividends of 1.2 billion following the anticipated dissolution of the Namibia Post and Telecom Holdings Company during the next financial year. An additional 500 million is expected from the sale of the remaining 9% shares in the mobile telecommunication company MTC. Further, dividends are also expected from other public entities, notably the Bank of Namibia, Namibia Desert Diamonds, NamDia, and Namibia Port Authority, NamPort. The revenue estimate also includes a 1.4 billion in a once-off legacy tax liabilities of selected public enterprises, as I will elaborate shortly. Over the medium-term expenditure framework, revenue is projected to average 5%, reaching 93.6 billion by the end of 2026-27 financial year. In the outer years, the revenue projections incorporated cautious estimates of SACCO receipts as well as moderate increase in domestic revenue aligned to our positive growth expectations. We project revenue as a ratio of GDP to remain strong, averaging 29.9% over the medium term. Despite accounting for anticipated downside risk and taking a conservative approach in our forecast, the revenue outlook is still clouded by uncertainties in the global and domestic economies. Nevertheless, we remain committed to maintaining fiscal sustainability and will thus approach any unanticipated revenue shortfalls in a manner that not compromise the gains on our fiscal metrics thus far. Honourable Speaker, honourable members, fellow Namibians, the strengthening domestic economic fundamentals and the resultant strong revenue performance have created an avenue for us to expand the spending envelope to accelerate service delivery, address the most pressing needs, and improve infrastructure development. In this context, I table before the House for the 2024-2025 budget of 100.1 billion Namibian dollar. This total expenditure includes 3.2 billion in development projects funded through external loans and grants, as well as 12.8 billion in interest payments. On balance, the total budget has increased by 12.4% from the revised estimates of the preceding year. Accordingly, the operational budget is estimated at 74.6 billion, representing an increase of 8.8% over the previous financial year. The increase in operational expenditure largely reflects the 5% adjustment in civil service wage bill at a cost of 1.7 billion to guard against the erosion of purchasing power. Despite significant inflationary pressures over the past several years, civil servants have exercised extraordinary patience, and we would like to extend our heartfelt appreciation for their forbearance during the difficult economic conditions. The wage bill adjustment is effective from the 1st of April 2024. The operational budget also includes a 1.4 billion in once-off legacy tax liabilities of selected public enterprises. This includes those enterprises whose funding was severely reduced due to fiscal consolidation in the previous years. The beneficiaries include the following: the University of Namibia, TransNamib, the Namibia Broadcasting Corporation, New Era Corporation, the National Fishing Corporation, and the Road Contractors Company. Accordingly, this transaction is recorded as both revenue and expenditure in our books, resulting in a neutral position from a fiscal perspective. Furthermore, this action was undertaken on the back of agreed conditions, including regular publication of audited financial statements and commitment to meet future tax liabilities henceforth. I would like to emphasize that this is an exceptional once-off exercise to clear the legacy debt of public enterprises accumulated prior to the establishment of NAMRA. This action is undertaken to enable NAMRA to apply the law to all taxpayers equally. Should any public enterprise accumulate tax liabilities going forward, Treasury is not prepared to offer any support. To close the infrastructure gap, Honourable Speaker, that continue to weigh against our growth potential, the development budget has been increased significantly by 58.1% to 12.7 billion. This is inclusive of 3.2 billion in grant and loan funded projects to improve infrastructure through various ministries. The development budget is equivalent to 4.6% of GDP, a significant improvement from previous years. Nevertheless, we remain concerned about limited project execution capacity at most OMAs and procurement bottlenecks, which continuously translate instrumentalization of funds from and underspending on the development budget. Accordingly, government will continue to work on addressing these shortcomings. Lastly, we have budgeted 12.8 billion to meet debt servicing obligation in 2024-2025, equivalent to 14.2% of revenue and 4.7% of GDP. The debt servicing metrics, although stabilizing, still remain above the desired benchmark of 10% of revenue. Therefore, the fiscal framework for specific The fiscal framework provides for specific measures to maintain public debt on a reduction path and ensure that debt is raised in a cost-effective manner. Overall, we estimate to realize a positive primary budget balance of 1.4% of GDP during 2024-2025. Subsequently, the budget deficit is projected at 8.9 billion in nominal terms, equivalent to 3.2% of GDP for 2024-2025. In the interest of pursuing fiscal sustainability and debt stabilization, we aim to maintain a primary surplus and consequently keep the budget deficit below 4% of GDP over the medium-term expenditure framework. From a financing perspective, the government will employ a combination of domestic debt instruments and funding from multilateral organizations for ongoing infrastructure projects in the road, water, and railway sectors. As customary, the detailed borrowing plan for the issuance of domestic securities will be disseminated to market participants before the commencement of the new financial year. Reflecting on the above developments, the public debt stock is estimated at 165.8 billion or 60.1% of GDP during 2024-2025, a reduction from an estimated 62.5% of GDP at the end of the preceding year. Economic policy priorities over the medium-term expenditure framework. My apology, Honourable Speaker. For 2024-2025, national budget contains macroeconomic policy proposals aimed at supporting economic growth through accelerating infrastructure development. The budget includes the following significant policy priorities. We have made provisions to the tune of 2.5 billion in the next financial year towards railway infrastructures, consisting mainly of 1.9 billion for the upgrading of the Kransberg or Chuarongo railway section and the 488 million for the rehabilitation of the Sanferhals-Buchhausenbrunn railway section in the south. In this context, critical sections of our national railway line are in a state of disrepair and will thus enjoy attention from a funding perspective in the next medium-term expenditure framework. In this regard, a total of 6.6 billion is earmarked for the railway network development over the MTEF. These allocations are further complemented by operational funding, a dedicated loan facility to purchase rolling stock, as well as ongoing efforts to improve governance at Transnami. We have provided a capital budget of 970 million to the Ministry of Education, Arts and Culture to cater for the construction and renovation of classrooms and other school infrastructures. The allocation reflects our recognition of the urgency to close the infrastructure gap in the education sector and to reduce stark inequalities in access to social infrastructures, especially for the rural and low-income communities. Furthermore, we remain broadly attuned to the need to invest in human capital development as a catalyst for sustainable development and poverty reduction in the long term. We have seen in the video I shared earlier how these allocations make a huge difference in the day-to-day lives of our learners and the communities they come from. And we are encouraged to do more, resource permitting. To accelerate the implementation of the recently approved National Housing Policy, the 2024-2025 budget has allocated a total of 700 million to the informal settlement upgrading, massive land servicing and other programs to improve access to housing opportunities nationwide. We hope this allocation will fast-track the provision of bulk infrastructure in various local authorities to improve access to services, especially in the informal settlements. Accordingly, additional implementation capacity will be required in this context, including closer collaboration with the private sector. In line with our commitment to improve the living standards and the quality of life of all Namibians, funding to the housing sector will remain a key priority over the medium-term expenditure framework, subject to available resource envelope. Given the energy supply shortage in the region, there is a need to fast-track the implementation of the approved domestic generation and transmission projects to increase local generation capacity and to improve system stability in the medium term. In line with this, an allocation of 200 million for 2024-2025 and another 200 million for 2025-26 has been made to support NamPower in funding the development of the 40 megawatts Ochikoto biomass power station. The vote for water receives 2.2 billion in 2024-2025, including a 1.1 billion in loan-funded projects, a significant increase from the previous year's ceiling. The beneficiary projects include the refurbishment of the Shakati and Rundu treatment plants, as well as the development of the second Ohangwena Aquifer well field. In addition, funding has been availed for drilling boreholes, expansion of pipelines, and various rural water supply projects to improve access to water within communities, especially considering the increased drought incidences. Now let's listen very carefully. Tax policy and administration reforms. We will talk about the amnesty as well. Honorable Speaker, on the tax policy front, over the preceding MTF, we maintain a policy stance not to consider new tax policy proposals, specifically those with potential to stifle economic recovery and compromise the emerging growth prospects. Broadly, we still maintain the same view, and as such, this budget continues specific tax policy proposals aimed at providing some relief to taxpayers, with the aim to boost domestic demand and to broaden the tax base to improve revenue mobilization. Further, we have considered specific proposals to enhance the competitiveness of our tax system, to attract investments and foster private sector development. In this context, I'm happy to announce the following resolutions. As confirmed previously, the 2024-2025 budget has made provision to provide tax relief to low-income earners. In this regard, we will increase the threshold for income tax on individuals from the current 50,000 to 100,000 per year. Let's listen to this one. This action results in an injection of 646 million directly into the pockets of taxpayers. I think that deserves a big round of applause. We are all included. Effectively, all individual taxpayers will be exempted from paying tax on the first 100,000 of their income as from the 1st of March 2024. In this respect, the revised tax tables will be published accordingly. Furthermore, we have made provisions in the 2 outer years of the MTF to adjust all tax brackets for inflation creep. In this regard, a total of 712.9 million per annum in direct relief to taxpayers has been provided for. As previously communicated, the non-mining company tax rate will be reduced by 2 percentage points during the medium-term expenditure framework. Accordingly, the tax rate will be reduced to 31% effective 1st of January 2024, with a further reduction to 30% taking effect January 2025. Furthermore, to improve competitiveness against regional peers and in keeping with global developments in corporate income taxes, the non-mining company tax rate will be reduced further to 28% during the 2026-2027. Nonetheless, to maintain tax neutrality, this reduction will be undertaken alongside broadening the corporate tax income base by doing the following: replacing the 3-to-1 thin capitalization ratio with a 30% limit on interest deductions, capping assessed losses carried forward at 5 years for normal companies and 10 years for companies operating the natural resources sectors, and thirdly, introducing a 10% dividend tax effective on the 1st of January 2026 to address the existing disparity in the investment arena, where dividends paid to non-resident shareholders is subject to tax. These proposed reforms on corporate income tax are expected to ensure revenue enhancement through improving corporate tax compliance and easing the administrative burden and audit burden on NAMRA. Overall, the changes are estimated to yield an additional taxes of more than 600 million per annum. To ensure that the principle of fairness and equity in taxation are fully applied with in the insurance sector, we will amend the law to remove the non-resident shareholder tax exemption for foreign insurance company shareholders and provide for taxation of shareholders' activities like other businesses. This change takes effect in 2024-2025 and is projected to yield an additional revenue of 180 million per year. In conjunction with the Ministry of Industrialization and Trade, we are working to introduce a special economic zone, the SEZ, as an anchor to our ambition to curate competitive industrial zones. Participants in the SEZ will be subject to a corporate income tax rate of 20% only. The nominal deduction in terms of capital allowances will apply in the SEZ regime, while VAT will be zero-rated. In this respect, the SEZ is expected to be tabled in the National Assembly in 2024-2025 in advance to the expiration of the export processing zone regime in 2025. Honorable Sayyid, listen to this one. For 2024-25, the budget is further lifting the mandatory registration threshold for VAT from 500,000 to 1 million. Increasing the threshold will relieve approximately 23,000 SMEs from VAT administration to focus on their core activities while simultaneously freeing capacity at NAMRA to focus on large taxpayers. We also confirm, as previously announced, the introduction of the Internship Tax Incentive Program aimed at further incentivizing employers to enroll more interns by providing an additional corporate tax deduction. The total financial implication for the government is estimated at 120 million per year. The 2024-2025 budget also proposes building improvement deductions to address the issue of urban decay within inner cities and to maintain existing infrastructure while encouraging investments. In this regard, a capital depreciation allowance of 10% each year will be applicable on the cost of buildings erected, added to, extended or improved, and which are used for trade purposes. As a measure to support improving access to housing, the brackets for transfer duties and stamp duties will be adjusted for inflation. Accordingly, the exempt level will be lifted from 600,000 to 1.1 million. So in other words, properties below that will not attract stamp duties and transfer duties. Accordingly, moreover, the threshold to trigger transfer duty of 8% will be increased to 3.15 million effective the next financial year. Lastly, a super tax transfer duty on stamp duty bracket for luxury, this is for luxury only. Luxury residential property will be introduced for residential properties costing above 12 million. Let's listen to this one. In the coming financial year, together with NAMRA, we will explore introducing a VAT e-invoicing system which will integrate and interface cash registers at businesses to integrated tax administration system. This envisaged digitization initiative will, among others, improve NAMRA's ability to collect, analyze, and monitor tax data, lower administrative and compliance costs, while VAT fraud and enhancing tax enforcement. Honorable Muharukwa. NAMRA will continue with the final leg of the tax amnesty program, whereby interest and penalties will be fully written off if taxpayers settle their outstanding capital by the 30th of October 2024. I would like to emphasize, Honorable Muharukwa, and all other taxpayers, that this is a final extension of this program. It is important for all concerned taxpayers to participate before the due date, because we shall not lend a sympathetic ear to anyone afterwards. The total capital tax arrears stood at 17.3 billion at the end of January 2024. Lastly, on tax matters, in conforming with Article 21 of the Circular Agreement, the following excise duties on consumption of alcohol and tobacco took effect on the 22nd of February 2024. A 340 milliliter can of beer increases by 10 cents. A 750 milliliter bottle of wine goes up by 18 cents. A 750 milliliter bottle of spirits will increase by $3 Namibian and 90 cents. A 23-gram cigar goes up by $5 and 47 cents. And a pack of 20 cigarettes, the duty rises by 98 cents. Now, remember, this tax can be avoided. It's discretionary. You don't have to pay this tax. You have a choice. Just make the right choice. Appropriation Bill, Honorable Speaker. Let's go to the appropriation bill. Allow me to provide some synopsis of the main budgetary provisions across different sectors and programs for the 2024-2025 appropriation bill. Social sector, investments in the social sector remains imperative for a developing economy like Namibia, as it is crucial for cultivating the long-term productive capacity for our economy, cautioning the social strata against vulnerabilities, as well as broadly improving the living standards in our country. As such, we continuously prioritize allocations to the social sectors to improve access and quality public services while safeguarding the gains made thus far on social and human development indicators. In line with this conviction, the social sectors will absorb 50.7% of the budget, equivalent to 44.3 billion during the next financial year. This is an increase from 39.4 billion in the preceding financial year. The allocations are aimed primarily to address the following issues, in addition to sustaining ongoing operations. A total of 18.4 billion has been allocated to the basic education, arts and culture vote in 2024-2025 and 56.1 billion over the medium-term expenditure framework. The budget of the Ministry of Gender, Poverty Eradication and Social Welfare has increased by 23.2% to 8 billion for the next financial year. The budget includes 824.7 million to maintain the real value of the social safety net in the face of high inflation and given the high dependency ratio. Accordingly, the old age grant and disability grant will be increased from 1,400 to 1,600 per annum. We hear you. Okay. Honorable Speaker, we fully recognize the dream of our departed President for a significant increase in the old age grant. but we cannot afford to deliver on his dream in a single financial year. Nonetheless, we will continue to work hard towards this goal with gradual increases over time as resources permit. In addition, we have made provision to increase the frequency of food distribution to marginalized communities at the cost of 170 million and 284.5 million to ensure full coverage of the orphan and vulnerable children, those that who have registered for this grant. Over the medium-term expenditure framework, the vote will absorb 24.5 billion. For the youth, the vote of sports, the younger parliamentarians, let's listen to this one. This is for the youth now, so the youth will punish you if you are not listening to this one. The vote of sports, youth and national service has increased by 45.3% to 679.4 million in the next financial year, and a total of 2.2 billion over the medium-term expenditure framework. Allocations have been made to various youth programs to support with skill development and capacity building. The allocation caters for, among others, skill development courses for out-of-school youth, 20 million, youth training through a charcoal and mushroom production program, 12 million, funding for the youth credit scheme, 10 million, financing for 121 youth enterprises across all constituencies, 9.8 million, and youth skill development through National Youth Service, 20 million. We take note of the re-energized interest in sports activities and have accordingly increased the operational budget for sport promotion programs by an additional 100 million. This includes 29.5 million for preparatory activities to enable us to host the Region 5 Youth Games in May 2025. In addition, 124 million has been provided in the development budget for, among others, upgrading the Independence Stadium, as well as various sports facilities and multi-purpose youth centers across the whole country. The higher education vote has been allocated 4.8 billion in the next financial year, 13% higher than the previous year. The additional allocation includes 200 million to NASFAF, bringing their total allocation to 2.3 billion and a total of 7.1 billion over the medium-term expenditure framework. Further, we have provided 108.3 million for a 5% increase in salaries for the UNAM staff. Over the medium-term expenditure framework, the vote will receive an estimated 14.7 billion. During the 2024-25, the vote of health and social services will receive a 10.9 billion and a sum of 34.3 billion over the medium-term expenditure framework. Within that allocation, we have availed more than 400 million in the development budget, including for commencing the earthworks at the Windhoek District Hospital in Gavana. The expansion of primary health care centers and clinics countrywide and improving capacity of referral hospital services. Further consideration has been made to cater for the recruitment of medical personnel as well as acquisition of pharmaceuticals and medical equipment. As I have outlined prior, this budget makes specific provisions for infrastructure development to close infrastructure gaps and give greater impetus to our economic growth objectives. In this regard, a total of 20 billion, Honorable Venani, and some 58.9 billion over the medium-term expenditure framework, inclusive of projects funded through external loans, has been allocated to the sector of economic and infrastructure. And the ministry is responsible for this sector, for carrying out the construction of infrastructure and implementation of economic policies. Collectively, these make up 23.9% of the total budget. The allocations are distributed among various votes as follows. During 2024-25, the Board of Transport will receive a total of 5.1 billion, including 1.9 billion in project finance through external loans and grants. In addition to fast-tracking the upgrading of the railway network, this allocation also caters 1.8 billion for the completion of ongoing road construction projects. Regarding airport infrastructure, an allocation of 131 million has been made available for 2024-2025. Over the medium-term expenditure framework, the vote will receive 14.5 billion. A total of 1.9 billion in the 2024-25 has been availed to the vote of agriculture and land reform. This includes 50 million dedicated for land purchase to address the plight of generational farm workers, as well as 87 million for the improvement of animal health and marketing across the communal areas. Provisions have been made for improving food systems. Listen, provisions have been made for improving food systems, as well as the Green Scheme program, including phase 2 of the Nekatal Dam irrigation project, among others. In support of SMEs and domestic activities, or domestic economic activities, we have increased the budget for the Ministry of Industrialization and Trade by 31.7% to 365.5 million in the next financial year, a total of 1.2 billion over the MTF. In this context, funding has been allocated to the Equipment Aid Scheme, Startup Namibia, and Protect Namibia to facilitate domestic trade activities and build domestic entrepreneurship capacity, especially for SMEs. Furthermore, we have made financial provision for increased funding to the Namibia Standard Institute and the Namibia Competition Commission, as well as an increase in the development budget for various capital projects to support entrepreneurship activities nationwide. The Ministry of Mines and Energy has increased by more than 50% to 381 million in 2024-25 and some 1.5 billion over the medium-term expenditure framework. The increased allocation is meant to improve capacity at the ministry, especially in the Petroleum Affairs Directorate, in the light of the upsurge in exploration activities in the Orange Basin. Furthermore, the development budget of the ministry has more than doubled, with 131 million availed to fast-track rural electrification and improve access to electricity countrywide. A total of 725.5 million has been availed to the Ministry of Environment, Forestry and Tourism, some 19.4% higher than the preceding year. The increased allocation should allow the ministry to attend to infrastructural deficiencies, given the increased volume of tourist arrival, as well as to improve the overall marketing of Namibia as a tourism hub. The Ministry of Finance, now this is for all of us. Let's listen. The Ministry of Finance and Public Enterprises has been allocated a budget of 8.1 billion for the next financial year, including 3 billion for the Public Servant Medical Aid Scheme. This is all of us. And more than 700 million in transfers to public enterprises. A total of 212 has been budgeted for MIDCO, the Mid Corporation of Namibia, inclusive of the settlement of their contingent liabilities. This is not a good news. Meanwhile, 300 million has been provided for Namibia to support their day-to-day operation, cognizant of significant infrastructure and operational challenges at Namibia. 88 million has been allocated for the completion of Ludres waterfront. Furthermore, Honorable Muharukwa, we have availed 77 million to Agribank for a dedicated subsidy program to support farmers whose operations have been adversely affected by drought conditions over the past few years. Dear farmers, we have heard your cries. In addition, we have put aside funds to explore mechanisms to accelerate employment creation in the economy. For the financial year 2023-2024, a total of 881.1 million was allocated to the contingency fund, and all the funds herein are fully committed. Accordingly, we have distributed corresponding information regarding the utilization of the contingency fund during the current financial year. In addition, 250 million is provided for in the contingency fund to cater for the unforeseen emergencies in 2024-2025. Honorable Speaker, public safety, it is important. The public safety sector takes up a total share of the budget of 17.6% of the non-interest budget. For 2024-25, an amount of 15.4 billion is allocated and about 48 billion over the medium-term expenditure framework. The allocations are spread as follows. The Anti-Corruption Commission has been allocated 106 million in the next financial year, a 29.8% increase from the previous financial year. Allocation for this important sector have been increased to improve the implementation capacity, particularly in the area of combating anti-money laundering and financial crimes. Despite the recent grey listing by the Financial Action Task Force, we have made significant progress and remain committed to address the outstanding action items for us to be removed from the grey list in the shortest time possible. Over the medium-term expenditure framework, the vote will utilize 299.2 million Namibia dollar. The vote of Home Affairs, Immigration, Safety and Security received 7.4 billion in the next financial year. In this allocation, provision of 70 million has been made for the ministry to roll out electronic identification cards, EIDs, and ensure full coverage of civil registration through mass registration for national documents countrywide. The judiciary has been allocated 444.5 million in the next financial year and 1.4 billion over the medium-term expenditure framework to ensure speed delivery of services. The vote of justice receives 674.3 million, about 8.6% higher than the previous financial year, and a total of 2.2 billion over the medium-term expenditure framework. Administrative sector receives 7.8% of the budget allocations and an amount of 6.8 billion in the 2024-25 financial year to support effective governance and efficient administration of public services. In this sector, the budget of the Ministry of Urban and Rural Development has been increased by 37.6% to 2.6 billion in the next financial year. In addition to provisions for housing, this allocation includes 250 million in the next financial year, which is 2024-25, and another 174 million in the next financial year for the rollout of prepaid water and electricity meters in various local authorities as a long-term solution to rising debt with NamPower and NamWater. And an additional 141 million has been allocated for the transformation of Aus and Ludres local authorities to improve services due to the growing population driven by oil and gas exploration, as well as green hydrogen activities in the region. Over the medium-term expenditure framework, the vote receives a total of 7.8 billion. The budget of the Office of the Prime Minister remains steady at 1.1 billion in the next financial year. In this regard, provisions to the tune of 700 million has been made to cater for drought relief in the event the 2024 rain season disappoints. The Electoral Commission of Namibia has been allocated a total of 438 million in the coming financial year to ensure smooth and timely voter registration, as well as to undertake the presidential and National Assembly election towards the end of the year. The detailed breakdown, Honourable Speaker, of the expenditure allocations and revised ceilings for various votes are available in the appropriation bill before you. I would like to conclude, Honourable Speaker. Honourable Speaker, honourable members, the 2024-2025 budget and the medium-term expenditure framework I just outlined was crafted against the backdrop of a much more stable macroeconomic fundamentals than we have seen in a long time. The stable economic platform allowed us room to channel resources to provide for the most urgent needs in the social sectors, increase outlays in investments in infrastructure, while providing some relief to households and corporates alike. Furthermore, we have maintained a careful balance to ensure that we can meet our upcoming debt obligations as we persist with fiscal sustainability imperative. I believe this MTF maintains a theme of fiscal prudence and places our public finances on a sound and sustainable path. Nonetheless, I caution us to guard against the fiscal gains we have made over the past few years by utilizing the window of opportunities presented by the strengthening economic activities to rebuild our fiscal buffers and spend our resources sparingly. We should carefully balance between our very real, very urgent, very large spending requirements and putting something aside to leave a better country to the future generations. The learners who are here with me today from Havana High School, Augustinium Secondary School, and their peers at home are counting on us to provide for their infrastructure needs, but in a manner that does not burden them with unsustainable debt obligations. In the broader economy, Honorable Speaker, I further extend my caution that the signs of recovery we are seeing today emanate from the very capital-intensive natural resource sector. Too great a share of our youthful population remains out of work. The disparities in income distribution that are still prevalent and poverty levels still require much more work. As such, the need to cultivate a conducive environment to support economic activities and encourage the development of the nascent industries remains very urgent. In particular, we need to address policy coordination gaps and administrative bureaucracies and duplications that frustrate businesses in their day-to-day operations and thus impede job creation. I implore us all to redouble our efforts to create a better future for the Namibian child. In closing, Honorable Speaker, I wish to sincerely thank our late President, His Excellency President Hage Geingob, for the confidence and honor he bestowed upon me to steer our public finances. I similarly would like to thank His Excellency President Nangolo Mbumba, Vice President Honorable Netumbo Nandi-Ndaitwah, Right Honorable Prime Minister Dr. Sarah Kogolora Madira, and Deputy Prime Minister Miester John Mutorwa, and indeed all my cabinet colleagues and all of you honorable members of Parliament for your continued support and camaraderie in the management of our national affairs. I also want to thank my colleagues, Honorable Obed Kanjode, the Director General of the National Planning Commission, and Deputy Minister Maureen Hinda Bwende. I further extend my appreciation to the Executive Directors, Ms. Valencia Uiras and Mr. Tates Dove, and our officials at the Ministry of Finance and Public Enterprises and the National Planning Commission for their usual support in preparing the budget. I also express my gratitude to the Bank of Namibia and NAMRA for the all-round support on fiscal matters. I thank the leadership and officials in all the OMAs for their hard work and understanding our fiscal stance. Honorable Speaker, my back-to-school journey has left me with some homework. The back-to-school journey has left me with some homework. Mr. Mweti, the principal of Havana High School, asked me a thought-provoking question. He said, and I quote, "Children from the Monte Cristo Primary School next door are fed daily at school, given food. However, there is no feeding program at secondary schools without hostels, yet the children come from similar households." He asked, what is the possibility of introducing feeding programs, especially at certain secondary schools that are located in less fortunate communities, end of quote. Mr. Matengu, the principal of Augustinium, has this to say: we are grateful for the resources we have received from government to renovate part of our school. we hope to still be considered in the future, as there are still some school buildings at our school that need renovation. End of quote. My interaction with the learners and teachers at the schools I visited has inspired me to work harder to care for the Namibian child. It has further demonstrated that the Namibian state has the capacity to look after its citizens effectively when it mobilizes enough tax revenue from taxpayers. This has underscored for me that as leaders in Namibia, we should nurture and support NAMRA to collect the revenue due to the state in order for us to deploy those resources to care for the Namibian child. I want to repeat this one. This has underscored for me that as leaders in Namibia, we should nurture and support NAMRA to collect the revenue due to the state in order for us to deploy those resources to care for the Namibian child. It has underlined the need for all of us who are in leadership positions to always think about the less fortunate members of our society when we spend state resources. The experience made me to envision a future where each Namibian child is accorded an opportunity to be well educated, productive, and contributing positively to the prosperity of Namibia. Honorable Speaker, you may say, I'm a dreamer. To paraphrase the word of John Lennon. Now, for my younger colleagues, they probably don't know who John Lennon is. They need to Google because he was more prominent in the 70s and the 60s. Please Google. To paraphrase the word of John Lennon, they may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I know the Namibian government is fully committed to this vision. I hope someday all of you honorable members of parliament, and indeed all Namibians, will join me in envisioning and working towards making Namibia prosperous and a better place for all of us. I thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Welcome back to the Market Watch studio. Now, at first glance, a lot of Namibians have a good reason to smile. Very, very interesting tax reforms announced by a Finance Minister, Iipumbu Shiimi, in his budget statement just now. Tax relief, a lot of it. Also, some relief in terms of a social grant, old age pensions, etc. Of course, the days to come, we will analyze the budget in a great lot of detail. For now, please stay on the Facebook page of Market Watch, where we have recapped the budget for you in short summaries for the most important aspects of it. So please go and read everything you need to get there. And then, of course, we will also keep you ahead of the pack in the coming days with analysis, etc. Until we see you again, goodbye.